Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guests are the heads of the mad gang behind the upcoming Exquisite Corpses. It's James Tynion IV and Michael Walsh. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to hang out, David.
I didn't really know how to refer to you guys. I was like, writer and artist does not really feel fair, so heads of the mad gang feels more appropriate.
I do like that as a title. Yeah. No, I mean, like, we've been going with like Games Master and and Groundskeeper a little bit based on the book, but yeah.
I like it.
It's fun. It's fun.
I think I have to change my bio now.
The Mad Gang. Have you two recovered from your roughly 1 million years of travel you've done recently? We'll start with you, Michael, because you just went back-to-back on cons. Are you surviving?
Yeah, I just had 2 weekends in a row of conventions, so I feel like I'm just exhausted and zapped. My social battery is completely drained, so I've just been locking myself up and watching TV and working and hanging out with my baby the last couple of days, which has been nice.
Nice. What about you, James?
Yeah. I think I'm on the path to recovery. I didn't have a full convention the weekend after Emerald City, but Mocha Fest was in New York, so I had lots of friends in town, and I definitely went and like walked around for a few hours. But it's like I'm coming off of that was like 5.5 weeks of travel, and then back here, and then next week I'm heading out to LA for the GLAAD Awards. So it's just like it has been nonstop. But honestly, it's been like really fun and affirming. But it is exhausting. It does, like, it wears me down a little bit. But it is nice. Like, there have been moments in my life I've been this worn down for less good reasons.
Yeah.
And being worn down for good reasons is a good.
I think when you work in comics and you're really busy, it can only usually be a good thing.
Yeah. James, you do kind of seem like the Jack Hawksmoor of like conventions and events, where you always seem kind of chipper. Like you get power from them. That's a reference to the authority character. He gets power from cities. You get power from events. You always seem really chipper about it. Either that, or you're just really good at faking it.
I mean, I think there was a little bit of fake it till you make it, but it is like it's genuine. And I think especially now, there were like a number of years that, especially like when I was, deep into the more corporate comics side of things, where I like half of every convention was sort of dealing with, upcoming story intrigue and, relationships between creators and all of that. But my favorite part of the shows was actually just like spending time with the people I make my books with and the people that read my books. And that was always what I took a lot of energy from. And now that's the entirety of what conventions are. And it feels so much better. It is a really, really validating feeling.
I think when you're like really, really excited about the work that you're doing, and then you're hanging out with the people that you're creating these books with, and they're excited, and then the fans are coming up to you and they're really excited. They want to know all about it. There's an electricity to that gets you up on another level at conventions that's not always there, but has been very much so lately.
I do think one of the interesting things, I've talked to a lot of creators about this. Most recently, I had Matt Fraction on the podcast, and we kind of talked about this idea to some degree. But it's like when Matt and Chip were doing Sex Criminals, and like people would be in line to like get Iron Man comics or Iron Fist comics signed by Matt. There was just kind of like almost a different energy to the people who came up wanting Sex Criminals signed. And do you kind of find that cons have kind of shifted as you've like fully embraced like Silver Coin for you, Michael, and now Exquisite Corpses, and James, like all of your own like your own babies, your own scary babies, so many scary babies. Do you feel like it's changed a little bit? Conventions have changed, that people are coming to you for you almost? Like not to downplay for hire work, but you know what I'm saying?
No, I think that changeover has definitely happened. Like, and at conventions, Something is Killing the Children is like the behemoth. And that's where I like at this point, I would say less than 1/5 of what I sign at conventions are my DC work, even though I have 10 years of DC backlist for people to get signed. And then oftentimes when people are coming through to get those books signed, they'll, they see, 5 Erica Slaughters standing in line with them, and it makes them want to check out Something is Killing the Children. And, and especially when they're waiting in line, then the people around them, like, you chat to the people around you in line, and that excitement kind of carries. And, and it's a really, really good feeling. And especially like, since, I think I sort of, going back to like what a lot of creators often think of is like they'll do their book and, in superhero land or in corporate comics in some way, and then they have their own books on the side. And I kind of feel like Something That's Killing the Children had become sort of my superhero book. That is the kind of the guiding light in. And because it's kind of, it's horror adjacent, it's like it has that kind of decompressed manga storytelling and all of these things that I like tapping into in all of these different lanes, that it's an easier handoff to the other sorts of projects that I'm trying to build. And sometimes I lean more directly into that. I think, it's an easy, like, I think it's a one-to-one to get someone who's interested in Something Is Killing the Children interested in Exquisite Corpses, when sometimes something like The Deviant is like a harder sell, because it is just like, it's a serious serial killer book that has no like larger than life elements, like murderous Santa Claus in it. But it is but like, generally speaking, it's a more somber piece. But like, it's knowing when it's like, okay, there's a through line here. This is something that we can sort of push people in this direction. And it's nice being able to lean into that, because, I love the superhero audience, and there are a lot of people in the superhero audience that, are willing to go out and try a lot of comics. But we all know that there are plenty of people who read superhero comics who don't have a huge interest in reading things outside of superhero comics. So it can be harder to, like, guide them into other titles.
Michael, do you have anything to add about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate the things that James has said. I worked for Marvel for a long time, like almost 10 years as well. And generally in that time, conventions consisted of me doing sketches of Deadpool and Spider-Man and Wolverine and talking about who would win in a fight. And now when I go to conventions, people are asking me about the history of the silver coin and who's going to kill who first in Exquisite Corpses, and why I did specific things in the Frankenstein book that I did. And I think that kind of dialogue is just so much more refreshing and invigorating, and it's gotten me excited for conventions again, frankly.
It's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
good thing, because you just did 2 in a row. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not built like that, Michael. I don't got that gear in me. All right. Well, let's talk about Exquisite Corpses. You did just come off of Emerald City Comic Con, where you did a fireside chat with the great Jaslyn Stone, where you chatted about the book. So there's a lot of details out there. I'm going to give the longest read in the history of the podcast, because I feel like it's necessary to read all aspects of the first issue solicit, because there's a lot to it. So I'm going to give a read. Well, first off, actually, Exquisite Corpses #1 is coming on May 21st with final order cutoff on April 21st. It's written by you, James, drawn by you, Michael, colored by Jordi Belair, lettered by the amazing, the underrated, the fantastic Becca Carey. I'm sorry I gave a big spiel. I just am a really big fan of Becca Carey. Here's the solicit with the extra parts I mentioned. Every 5 years on Halloween, the wealthiest families in America play a game. 12 of the deadliest people in the world are dropped into a small town with just one goal. Last killer standing wins. For the citizens of Oak Valley, Maine, this year's Unlucky Arena, the goal is much simpler. They must survive the night. Experience a comics event like no other from the minds of James Tynion IV and Michael Walsh, as they lead a group of the most exciting voices in the industry. Over 13 blood-soaked chapters, these creators will collaborate and compete to determine who wins and who dies, and the games begin in this triple-size debut. I had to say the whole thing because I feel like Exquisite Corpses is like, obviously it's a comic first and foremost, but it's almost like, I don't know, proof of concept. It's like this big thing that feels different than other things. But I will say, I have read the first issue, as I told you via email. It's great. It's fantastic. It's actually, I was impressed by it in a way that I was not expecting, which we will get to here in a little bit. But I do want to start at the beginning. Where does this journey start? Does it start with you, James? Does it start with the both of you? What's step one?
So, like, step one was like this. There's been an idea that's been floating in the back of my mind for like a very like loosely defined for a long time, which was just a kind of, I love working with creators to create these like really, really like iconic looking characters. And I wanted to do like literally the first time it was written on a whiteboard, it was just like serial killer fight 'em up. and like that was kind of the entirety of the concept at the beginning. But it's just like I knew that there was a vibe there that I really, really wanted to tap into. And this is the first real Tiny Onion project. The Tiny Onion brand like has kind of existed before the formation of the actual company, and it's like tied to a bunch of my books before then. But since like the actual company was founded, like this was been the primary thing that we've been cooking. And the moment that it was just like I knew that it's like, okay, the funding's coming, like all of that. The first call, like actually like 3 months before the funding actually came through, was the first call I made was to Michael Walsh. Like, and it was just like I was like, hey, I have this like crazy idea, which was, I wanted to bring something that I hadn't really experienced since leaving superhero comics to the more creator-owned side of the aisle, which is just like I wanted to pull together a summit of creators to crack a story together. Like, which is always one of my favorite things to do at DC. It was getting in a room with like Scott Snyder and Josh Williamson and just like being able to like actually like attack a problem as a group and figure it out together. And like because this core concept was all about this, like, okay, we're gonna throw a bunch of characters together and all that. It's just like, hey, Michael, do you want to create a bunch of like really, really cool looking killers in a bunch of different like with a bunch of different designs, and then like bring together a bunch of really, really cool creators, and then throw all of that information at them, and then have the writer's room try to figure out who wins, who dies, like when you put them head to head together, and just sort of like see if we can capture that kind of creative energy and put it directly on the page so readers can get the kind of energy that you get out of the best like superhero event comics.
Mm-hmm.
So Michael, what made it a yes?
I mean, when James Tynion asks you to co-create a book with him, I think you generally just say yes.
You're like,
But
let me think about it a little bit, James. I need like a week to sit on this.
Yeah, no, well, so me and James have known each other for a long time. We kind of came up at around the same time in comics. We're roughly the same age, and we have a lot of the same storytelling sensibilities. We enjoy the same things in the media that we consume.
You worked on Silver Coin together?
Yeah, so like I have wanted to work with James for a long time. I asked James to write a Silver Coin, and I was very blessed to have him on board on one of my favorite issues of Silver Coin, The Diner. It is absolutely brutal in all the best, most entertaining ways. And as soon as we finished, I think me and James were both like, well, that went so swimmingly. We need to do something again sooner rather than later. So it was just kind of waiting for the right thing to pop up. And yeah, when James said, do you want to jump on a Zoom? I've got kind of a big idea. I said, yeah, let's do it. And I think I was just starting on Frankenstein. So I knew that Frankenstein was 4 issues. I knew that I did want to get back to Silver Coin after, but I didn't have to get back to Silver Coin right after. So there was kind of that little bit of a gap, the opportunity for me to think about something else. So the timing just worked out perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, when you came on the podcast last, Michael, you said you were like, I have Null Hunter, I have Frankenstein. I also have this other thing I'm developing with James Tynion and a bunch of other people. And I was like, what the hell is that going to be?
There you go.
I remember you emailed me and I immediately was like, what do you mean a bunch of other people? Now I know. Now I know. Now I get it. But it's interesting in a lot of ways. But one of the things that fascinates me the most about it, I'm going to hold the Corpse Crew brainstorming session off to the side for a bit. I want to get to that because I think that's really fascinating. But James, in your newsletter, when this was announced, you said Exquisite Corpses is, and I quote, a game developed by me and Michael Walsh, and the first players of that game were the creators who were brought on board to help bring the story to life. The fact that you call it a game is very interesting to me. And the fact that, from what I understand, Michael, you actually made cards that had stats on it because you're a Magic the Gathering guy. That's what you do. You literally make cards as part of your job. Start with you, Michael, just because you're the gamified one. Can you explain how it was a game first?
Well, the Exquisite Corpses story in and of itself is a game. And I think even on our very first call about it,
between you and James?
Between me and James, there was this idea that we could also at the same time develop a game to go with the comic book so that other people could be able to experience role playing as these killers, which is just such a fun thing to do when you're creating a book, when you're writing a story and pacing out all the character beats. So I think at first it was just this rough idea that we could have a game, we could have a comic, we could build this out and make this huge world, make an expansive universe, and tie in a bunch of different facets and other worlds of media. And so when we had our very first summit, on the drive up there, it was about an hour and a half drive from my house to meet up with James, and we were going to hash out everything that was going to happen in the book. My brain was just running in overdrive trying to think of how this could work as a physical game that you could sit and play with a bunch of friends and role play as these killers. And by the time that I arrived in Buffalo, I had a rough idea of how an actual physical card game could work. So I put all the different stats for all the killers down on little whiteboard cards and tuned them as we started playing. And we just kind of developed a game on the spot in a very spontaneous, electric way, and it worked. And then we said, well, I guess we can actually make this work. So it's been something that we've also been developing alongside the comic as kind of a secondary part of what we're building.
I feel like I need to give the other side of that narrative, because it is like, because it's like from that first conversation, it was a very, very exciting conversation, but I'm still thinking about the comic. It's just like, and Michael's like, this sounds like it could be this like a card game as well. And I was like, yeah, it could be a card game. It could be a movie. It could be like all of these things. And then, so like the fact that like 6 months later, when we do the actual like in-person summit, like Michael walks into the room and then just starts laying down cards and like writing on them. And it is a functional game that we play that afternoon.
Yeah.
Like that. And it was a fun game. Like that was the thing that was just like completely wild. And it changed the like, and I can send like, I have like one of the like the versions. I did I made my own version like directly after it with like just I use Sharpie instead of like dry erase markers so it would hold. But it's just like those in like in that moment, it was just seeing that it's like, okay, this is an iterative concept.
Yeah.
This is something that like, and it changed the entire way that we approached it. Like, because essentially it like, because what the way we kind of built these sort of these creative summits is that first summit was to lock in the killers and the world, like, and kind of the rules of all of it. But it's just like, we didn't want to like really set anything past the first issue before the rest of the team came in. Mm-hmm. So it's like what like so the first summit I think was like roughly a year ago. It was like February or March of last year. It was still snowy up in Buffalo, which I guess that could be as late as April, but it was like we got the core like Tiny Onion team, and Walsh came over the border from Hamilton because Courtney Menard, who's who's our head of production, lives in Buffalo. We all gathered there. It was this really, really easy thing to do. We got an Airbnb together, which was crazy. And it was definitely very, very cold in that like weird little house.
In that little haunted house.
Yeah. And we just started like, and so we went through, it's like, there are going to be this many killers. These are the weapons. These are like how, and then like some broad shapes about this is the town. These are the sort of locations that exist within the town. Like essentially we were putting together the raw pieces of like a game Bible, and like a game Bible, and that also functioned as a story Bible. And then basically we spent the next 6 months pulling the team together. And also like I wrote the entire first 60-page script, and like we wrote a comprehensive Bible. Michael designed all of the characters, including the civilian characters, like on top of all of the killers. And then it's just like we sent all of that to like our corpse crew, and basically we're like, we come into the room and then we start breaking with issue 2 and we go from there. And it's just like that, but it was like we wanted to just lay all of the pieces on the table. It was like, here's the Bible. This is how the world works. Here are the rules. Like, and each of us had a set of rules. Like I had a set of storytelling rules for all of the writers, that it's just like, we don't do flashbacks. We don't do internal narration. We're trying and then also like something that you can read in the first thing. We have all of these larger than life characters, but the actual emotional story, the thing that makes it a horror story, is that it's seen through the eyes of the civilians of Oak Valley. It has to, for it to function as horror, it has to be their story, and they are getting caught in the crossfire of this like these very, very dangerous things. And it was just like that's really where it all came from. But it was like, but the game element just became so important as we were building it all out. And we realized pretty quickly that we want, rather than sort of like push this off to the end, I think the first conversations is like, oh, maybe we'll do a game like directly out of the end of the first series. And it's like, no, we want the game to exist like as the series comes out. So people, like, as these issues come out, people can slowly build a deck that then they can play it at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it was kind of fun getting to the summit with the full writers group and playing the game first and then jumping into writing the book, because it added almost like this idea of the game, this competitiveness, this one-upsmanship, where it was like we were all playing with action figures in that writer's room, and different people we were passing the hot potato to the next person, and they were playing with the action figures in front of the group. It was so fun the way that we worked that room.
So let's talk about that room. Let's establish who was in the room first. Was it the entire corpse crew, which I will note as from the first issue, it said it's Adam Gorham, Che Grayson, Claire Rowe, Gavin Fullerton, Jordi Belair, Mariana Ignazi, Pornsak Pisha Tyler Boss, and Valentine Delandro. Was it that crew, the Tiny Onion crew, and the two of you? Or was there others in there?
So it was the writers from that crew. We were still like casting the full art side of it at that point. It was like we brought in the writers, but the thing about the writers that we brought on is most of them are kind of multi-hyphenates. Yeah. So it was just like right out of that first meeting, there were sort of two people we knew that we wanted on board. Jordi Belair, we were already starting to talk about bringing on as one of our first artists in residence at Tiny Onion. Jordi is, I think, the best colorist in all of comics. And on top of that, is a brilliant horror writer in and of herself. Like, Redlands is just such an incredible book. And, and she's someone that both like Walsh and I have known our entire career. And it was just like, we knew that we wanted her energy in the room. The other person who was like, drinking with us in the evenings up there in Buffalo,
Tyler,
in that first summit, was Tyler Boss. Who, like at that point, I had known for a long time that Tyler was interested in, writing on top of, like, not just at being an artist, but it was reading the first script for the first issue of You'll Do Bad Things, his new horror project that's coming out, I think, like in the next couple of weeks from Image Comics. That was just like, oh shit, like Tyler is like really, really good at this. And he's also someone who's just like we vibed with like really, really perfectly. And it's just like, but once again, we have a multi-hyphenate. We have an artist writer, someone who's going to sit in the room, and like with Jordi, it's thinking about like tone on top of like the actual feeling of every single individual scene. And then you have Tyler, who's thinking about, like, similar to how like Walsh thinks, it's like in these images that like how can we boil a scene down to an iconic image. The other folks that we were excited to bring on is like, I've known Pornsak since, I was an intern at DC Comics when he was an editor at Vertigo. And I was in the Vertigo.
Did he chop out for you, Michael? Oh,
yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay, sorry. But yeah, it's like, I can go back.
You chopped out right after you said that you were an intern when he was an editor at Vertigo.
Yeah, so he was an editor at Vertigo, and I was just the editorial intern in the offices. And he but we always really got along. And then he is just such an incredible, like, Infidel, I think, is one of the best horror comics of the last 10 years. But like, he also has been working in writers' rooms in Hollywood this entire time. And so it's just like he knew how to like operate in a room, and so did Che Grayson. Jay Grayson has been working in animation and in like on a bunch of really cool projects that I'm not allowed to reveal what she's been working on. But I met her through, like, I'd known her socially, but I remember getting a call from Scott Snyder a few years ago when she was developing one of the projects for Dark Spaces over at IDW. And Scott was like, Jay is fucking amazing. And it was just like, and so it's like, okay, like I want to find a project that we can work with together. So it's like and then the last person in the room, which was the kind of the most obvious one that, like, was just like, we were kind of like, oh, who should we get to, like, because we knew we wanted one more slot. And then it was just like, we have one of the best, we have one of the best horror writers, like, already. It was just like, bringing Michael in at like it, like, especially how that allows us to shape the narrative, where it's just like Michael is doing, like, I wrote all of issue 1, like Michael's writing all of issue 2, and then an issue like sort of dead in the middle of the story cycle, and then I'll write the last 2 issues. So we get to kind of provide the infrastructure to the whole thing. And then on top of that, we'll be writing a kind of, we'll be writing a piece of every issue that carries over the entire run. So it's like our presence is constantly felt. Kind of operating as there are characters within the series, the Games Master and the Groundskeeper, who are, look a little bit like the two of us. And so it's just like, we are the external forces, and the writers that we brought in are following what's happening, boots on the ground in Oak Valley.
Yeah, I think us bookending it and then like having the pin in the middle to just set the boundaries of the story was really smart. And then also like starting the writer's room with you doing your intro and then me breaking the second issue in front of the room, like it just started things already with such momentum that I think like we were able to rip through, and there were no real lulls in the progress or the electricity. It was also just serendipitous that I think there was a lot of balance in the way that all of us think about story and character. Pornsack and me had a conversation afterwards that he said we were really lucky because they say that in a writer's room, there's 3 type of people. There's minders, grinders, and finders. Minders are very thoughtful. They don't talk as much, but they kind of soak it all in. And then when they do speak, they usually can break through a moment where there's a stall, or they can have something very, very insightful to say. The finders are people that are always looking for the heart of things and the method and the purpose of the characters and the interiority of them. So they're kind of like searching for depth in everything that people are saying. And then the grinders are people that are just constantly throwing out ideas, just throwing stuff at the board, waiting for something to stick. So we had a really good balance of all 3 of these types of people in the room, which just kept things flowing constantly. And it just kept things breaking at such a good pace. It was just, yeah, like I said, there was an electricity to that room that I don't think is replicable very easily.
I think one of the interesting things about it, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things about that room, but I like the fact that it's not just that you're all doing similar, that you all have similar roles. Pornsack, editor originally, and has that editor brain to him, and he always has. I mean, like, just did my God, I'm complete Horizon Experiment. He just did the Horizon Experiment where he kind of shepherded that whole project. So got that brain. Michael, you bring a kind of, it's not that the game side is like a defining characteristic for you, but it's something you got in your bag. Jordy thinks in color and is probably going to shape the conversation in ways that you wouldn't necessarily do that. And I'm sure everyone else in that room has these unique skill sets and these unique viewpoints. And that's kind of the interesting thing about it, is like, if the 2 of you sat in a room and put this together, it would be an interesting project. And if you did all 13 issues by yourselves, it would be an interesting project. It becomes something much different because of the summits you all did and because of how you're doing this book, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, things that came out of that room that I think are completely different than how they would have been if it was just me and James on the book. There was killers that me and James thought, they'd last 1 or 2 issues and we'd kill them off. But in the room, as people got behind them and got invested in them, they became the killers that lasted the longest and had the most depth and became the most interesting. I think as other people kind of shepherded them and grabbed onto them and really liked them and wanted to do more with them. So, you can't, it was probably the most collaborative project I've ever worked on. And that says something in such a collaborative medium like comic books.
James,
Yeah.
you said that this in God, I think it was the Forbes article. I don't remember. You said it was the most creatively exciting weekend of your life.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just because heading into it, like, there are so many things that could have gone wrong. And like
Yeah.
heading into that weekend, I was like very aware of it's like there was a like I remember sitting down like the Tiny Onion team like before everyone else showed up, where it's just like, okay, we want to break this entire story. But worst case scenario, all we really need to do is break the first half of it. Like, because, like this is, we can come back together at some point or do like a digital like summit or like something like that that would allow us to kind of burn through, because it's like we had limited time. We were also we did a group signing up there in Buffalo, so it's just like and we wanted to play the game too. Like, it is like we wanted to capture a lot, so it's like, okay, we need to have good vibes and all of that. I think we might hit some walls like creatively and not be able to do that. But then it was just like the energy just carried through. And I remember like once we were like getting into the second day of it, it was like, oh, we're gonna get to the end. Like, and then I remember like literally like we ended up wrapping a little bit early, and what the way we had sort of done it is we kind of got it up to the point of where I would go in and kind of like do the ending from there. And I literally went up to the hotel room, like just like buzzing with the energy of the previous two rooms. And then I broke what I was thinking for that, and then sent it around to the whole team. And then we ended up chatting it at dinner that night. Like, it was
Yeah.
just one of those things where it's just like we could not contain the energy of the project. And that was like just so thrilling. It was just like really, really good. Yeah.
I remember after we finished that day and going up to the room to take a break before dinner because I was exhausted. If you remember, James, I was sick the night before because I was having those
Yeah.
stomach issues. And so I was so tired, and I was just like lying in my bed, but I didn't want to fall asleep because I knew if I did fall asleep, I'd never get up in time for dinner. And I just got that text from you that was like, I have it. And you just broke down the end of the story. I was like, that son of a bitch. And I just got up out of bed, and I was so excited because it was perfect. Like, it just all just fell into place, I think.
In a weird way. So I did an oral history of the 2015 Marvel event Secret Wars, where I talked to the people, well, the main people who did it, Jonathan Hickman, Tom Brevoort, Ehsan Ribic, everybody that was on the main book, but also people who did the Battle World books that like built off of that, where they shut down all the books and then you had to do something off of the idea. You're probably gonna be the only time that Exquisite Corpses is compared to 2015 Secret Wars, but in a lot of ways it kind of feels like that energy where it's like you get in the room, you have the core concept, and everyone just builds off of that main thing. It just builds and builds and builds. Is that kind of where, James, you've kind of positioned this as like the action horror intergenre universe? Is that kind of a little bit of that? Because I think the fascinating thing about Exquisite Corpses is like you have, theoretically, this is a bunch of wealthy families doing this to control America for a long time. You could do this a lot of times, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of options. Is that kind of where all that came from? It's just like the fact it's so iterative?
Absolutely. And I mean, like, and beyond that, we've just created 12 wildly interesting killer characters that people are going to want to know more about. So it's just like I think part of the idea here is we're going to see who the readers really respond to, and who like creatively like we really respond to. And we already have, a rough idea of who those characters are going to be. But it's just like we see like coming out of the first series being able to like do individual stories about some of these killers, and then it's like, and then being able to come back like after telling some of those stories into another big event cycle where we tell, and it doesn't have to necessarily be the next game. We can go back into the past. We could do the like Exquisite Corpses 1985 with a bunch of like killers that have that kind of like is like serial
Slasher
killer
villain.
like slasher vibe. And it's
Yeah.
just like, and then lean directly into that. And it's just like the idea that every few years we'll create this new like batch of killers while kind of building this larger mythology that underwrites the entire thing, that is like, it's both complicated, has lots of depth, but has a very simple core to it. So it is something that it feels like we can continue in it without it becoming too overwrought. And there are little things in there, like we have this character, the lone gunman, who's like key to the first issue of Exquisite Corpses, and will be one of the like premier characters throughout the series.
He's got a
And
past.
he's got a past. But I mean, like, beyond that, he wears this golden mask that we introduce as like every killer that the Massachusetts family has selected from the start of the game has worn that golden mask. So every game of Exquisite Corpses going back like over 100 years has had someone wearing that golden mask. And they've used different weapons. They've used different, there are so many different things. And it's just like, it's a little piece of that creates a level of world building that just allows us to peel back the layers like over and over and over again. That, it feels both like, there's a lore here that we can tap into while still allowing, like, I think the principles of like an Exquisite Corpses like story cycle, like the main event, is always going to need to focus on the actual humans in the town that are affected by all of this.
Right.
And it's similar to a principle that I try to follow, like with Something is Killing the Children, where it's like every larger Something is Killing the Children story cycle, like the 15 issue story cycles that we do, like the core, like the main character of the first arc of 15 issues of Something is Killing the Children isn't Erica Slaughter. It's the young boy James, who's like going through that entire event. He is the child who is seeing his friends die, who's like unpacking the mystery. And Erica is this larger than life element that has descended on Archer's Peak, Wisconsin. And it is kind of trying to bring that spirit into this thing where it's just like the human stories need to be like, because it's not a horror story unless it's like we're focused on those human characters.
You've had some excellent comps that are very thoughtful. I mean, Stephen King shows up, James. I am like the extremely basic boy who is like, okay, bear with me. It's like Fortnite in the concept. You get parachute into this place, shit happens, meets Ready or Not. I don't know if you watch Ready or Not, but
Yeah.
Ready or Not is like, it's a more expansive collective version of Ready or Not. And I do think the interesting thing about that is similar to that movie. The people you get invested in the most are the regular people. And that was the thing that surprised me about it, is all the buildup has been about the very bad people with big hammers and big guns and all these big other things. And the book starts, this is an extremely mild spoiler. It starts with the sheriff, a character who is in negotiations, in the process of sorting some stuff out. And that immediately, because there's a part of me, it's like sometimes when you hear, not like this specific thing, but sometimes when there's like a core concept, you can get focused on the concept and lose the people in it. And reading that open with the sheriff and the clerk at the convenience store with very questionable podcast habits, Mike, exactly. Reading that section made me realize that this was still very much going to be a James Tynion comic and a Michael Walsh comic in all the best ways. Granted, you're going to be sharing it with others, but it means it's grounded in people. And I think that was simultaneously, it shouldn't be surprising, but it was surprising. And I was heartened by that fact, even though they're all in mortal danger at all times.
No, I mean, that was so key. Like, I don't think this would work if it was just a beat 'em up kind of comic. Like, if we were just if the focal point of the story were the killers that we were dropping into this mix, then it's just an action comic where and then on top of that, then it's just like, then we're being callous about like the human life that's being lost in the midst of all of these characters. Like, we need to feel the weight of it, and it needs to be horrible. Like, it's a bad thing that this game is being played and that this game exists. Like, that is so important to the actual heart of this whole project. And it's just like, so the human characters, and seeing like human characters from the full spread of this town who are able to witness what's happening from every sort of rung of the social ladder, is like so key to, like, I think, if we pull this off, if this is the project that works, it's going to work because of those principles.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most fun things for me actually, James, was designing the civilians and trying to make them feel like people that you would meet just every day walking down the street. So that contrast between these real lived in characters versus the larger than life almost cartoonish killers was just like a blast to develop. And I think that's one of the strongest things that you do as a writer is all these characters that you create, they never feel like they fall into cliches. They just feel like real people living their day-to-day lives. And I think that's part of the strength of this book too. Despite all the stuff that we've talked about with all the killers, it's like the civilians are the heart of the book for sure.
I like the
Yeah.
fact that you gave us the civilians to root for, but also one that we really want to see die, which is a real plus in the, not to be too morbid about it, but I'm pretty sure most people who read it will probably agree with that. So when you were developing this, what came first? Regular people, the families, or the competitors?
You cut out for a second.
Oh,
And you're still frozen on my screen.
Yeah, you're frozen on my screen too, David.
okay. I'm sorry. I think my internet is unstable. It is not taking Dayquil today. Can you hear me? You guys are frozen on your end.
I can hear you, but not see you.
Okay.
Same, yeah.
Oh, wait, now I can see you.
Hey,
You're back.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Sorry, we finally had winter hit, and apparently it has decided to have ravage our internet. But so I am curious as to you obviously the competitors are going to be like the hook, like the 12 competitors rolling around with their varying weapons and everything like that. But when you were developing the book, what came first? Was it the regular people, the families, or the competitors? Or was it just kind of all in one stew?
It was definitely the killers first. Like, we knew that we wanted to have a balanced group of killers. And so it's like in that first summit, the one that was just like, it was me and Walsh and the Tiny Onion team. And it was just like right then we wanted to kind of have this balanced mix of characters. Like there's a group of characters who are kind of like extremities. They're kind of larger than life, a little cartoonish in certain ways. We have a handful of characters who are just like more in the like, mercenary camp, who are a little sexier, a little more like, characters that feel like more superhero adjacent in a lot of ways. And then we have some characters that are just pure horror. And it was just like, we wanted to have this kind of balance of extremities that we knew that it's just like, could serve both us as like, a commercial product, like on top of everything, where it's just like, we want, like, this is also a project that we're looking to tap into, like, the kind of collector audience that has like, has always supported my book and all of that. And it's just like, part of that is having exciting characters that people want to see on covers, like, and then characters that if like, as we build out the card game, that people would want to see different iterations of those killers on different cards and like things like that. So it's like we wanted to sort of like cook on those pieces. But we did lay out in that when we laid out the town, it's just like, here are the different like types of humans that we want to follow through the mix. The last piece that came were the families. Like, we had the large concept that there are these wealthy families that each of them chose them. But those the characters, I think, came more in the writing of the first issue than in the creation of the Bible, because the function they serve in the story is much more their function. Like, I knew I had the shape of what I wanted out of the character who's known as Massachusetts in the story, and she like was always like part of the core conception and the pitch that she makes. Like, I think even back in that first summit, it was like, I think this is kind of how I want to do it. But it was just like the rest of those families kind of came after the killers, after the townspeople.
I find the family is probably the scariest people in the entire book. Honestly. They're terrible. And I had a lot of fun with them too, designing those. But you'd already had like a pretty, not like super detailed, but you had some visual ideas and visual prompts for the families. Whereas I feel like the killers, while we were having our initial phone call, I was already spitballing killers with you on that very first call. And I think the next day I just sent you an idea for Gamer Kid. And then I had a few more ideas as the week went. And then you sent a bunch of ideas over. So that was like just a super collaborative process of doing the killers. So it was funny because I feel like we took completely different roads in designing the killers, the civilians, and the families, where it was like the killers, the first thought was like, let's figure out something visually striking was like our first instinct. And then with the civilians, it was like, let's figure out something like really real and lived in. And then with the families, it was like, let's figure out something topical and terrifying, So I feel
Yeah.
like there are 3 different tree branches of design sensibilities with those characters, which is why they all seem so visually disparate, but still really interesting in their own ways.
The kids as competitors part surprised me, especially the line that you wrote, James, for Massachusetts leading into the page where your gamer kid is introduced. I was like, oof, this is, whew,
No, I mean, like,
pointed.
but this is also, I think, like the game has to be horrifying. Like the game, like what is happening here has to be horrifying. And Gamer Kid is like definitely, I think, the scariest thing. Like if we were just like pitching this into like, TV film studios from Go, Gamer Kid would be the first one where it's like, you're not allowed to do this.
Yeah.
And this is also part of it's part of the fun of being in, coming at this from the comic space. Is just like we have the ability to kind of build this, even though it's like we're touching a few live wires here. But it's just like we're saying something with it. It's not just doing it for shock value, and we're not like glorifying anything while we're doing it. We want that character to be terrifying. And but it's like we're also going to push into the visual extremities of it all, and we want it to reflect the world that we live in, and the world that we live in is pretty scary right now.
Well, also the families are not going to value anyone's life, and it kind of speaks to them that they would bring a kid in for this just based on the possibility that he would be good at killing other people.
Yeah.
So when you were at the retreat and you were talking about the competitors, Michael, were you just drawing the whole time, just bringing them to life as it was happening?
First one, yes, but not in the writer's room. I feel like in the writer's room, I was very often standing up. And you know how I mentioned the 3 different archetypes of writers in the writer's room? I was grinding, I think, the whole time. Just talking and writing things on the whiteboard and drawing on the whiteboard and just like grinding through the room. So in that one, I was not drawing, but in the very first retreat, that was just me and James and Team Tiny Onion. I was doing a bunch of sketching during that, designing killers, figuring out setting stuff, and working on cards and game design as well.
James, are you a finder?
Yeah. I was standing in the corner. Or no, I'm the minder.
You're a minder?
You were a minder for sure. Yeah.
Like I was like, because especially like I had like, having written out the Bible and sort of the rules and all of that, like a lot of times it was sort of a like, we would keep digging into one of these pieces, and it would be kind of a like, okay, now all of this has been laid up on the table, and then I would pick it up all on the table and I would arrange it on the board.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was sort of like my primary role, like, at a few key moments where it was just like, okay, we gotta drill in. And also like trying to, like to what we were just talking about in terms of like keeping the focus on the civilians that are actually experiencing this. We have all of these really, really exciting killer characters, and like some of them, there's like hints at their incredible backstories and like all of these deeper stories that then kept being like, it's like we were kept surfacing all of that, and it's just like there's no way to tell that without doing a flashback, which we're not doing. So it is just like we have to like, what is the tip of the iceberg that we're seeing that still expresses this, that doesn't that can capture those sorts of emotions without just having like a huge expository dump in the middle of like a story that has like a million characters floating around. So it's just like that was part of the challenge. But yeah, I'm definitely a minder. I was standing sort of off to the side, like arms crossed, like just sort of observing everything, and then I would step in.
Yeah, I feel like there was moments where like we'd all be getting into the weeds a little bit, and we're all kind of, people are starting to talk over each other a little bit, and because we're just trying to meld our minds together on a beat. And then James would kind of turn to the group with his arms crossed and just be like, guys, I have it. And then it would just kind of like go silent, lay out, like kind of taking the best of what everyone was throwing at the table and find the road through that blockage, which was obviously a way to keep things going. I mean, we broke down 13 issues in 2 days. So
Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I would say like, yeah, Tyler did the most sketching during
Yes.
the actual thing. He would, especially like Rascal Randy beats. He kept drawing Rascal Randy's.
That feels like a Tyler.
Yeah. I think there is an affinity there between him and our terrifying mascot rabbit.
It seems like rules are very crucial to this entire exercise.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes it like, the gameplay of it like fundamental. Like there had to be rules heading into that writer's room. There had to be rules and the rules had to be easy enough to understand that they had to like the rules for writing the comic aren't the same as the rules for playing the game. Like,
Right.
because that it couldn't be that chaotic. Like, because in the game, you can go off down a weird little like rabbit hole. Like it is one of those things where it's just like anything can happen in gameplay. And this had to work as a satisfying like narrative over 13 issues. Like with emotional arcs for all of the characters and how we built it out. And it was just like that was like key to what we were building. But it was a, the like I like rules. I like laying out like story bibles and building worlds around these sorts of stories. But then I like kind of setting all of that aside and then just telling the story. Like
Mhm.
that it's something that I've talked a lot about like my process when I'm just doing one of my own individual books, and it all kind of comes from like what I learned in building out Something is Killing the Children, where it's just like I only had the broadest pieces of the world behind Erica Slaughter before I started writing that book. But then once I was a little ways in, it was just like, okay, I need to write all of the rules of this. And that turned into the books of Slaughter, like the Book of Slaughter, Book of Butcher, Book of Cutter, that kind of lay out the entire mythology around, Something is Killing the Children in the Slaughterverse. And it's like I needed to, but yeah, I like thinking of systems. I think that that's like the kind of key thing, and that's even though I'm less of a game person than Michael is, like that. I think that's the affinity between me and tabletop games people is just like I like knowing the rules of a world and seeing the full shape of it. And but then it's like I always like I do have my priorities when it comes to actual like storytelling, and those kind of exist as a cousin to it, but not a direct corollary.
Yeah, I think rules are really important to storytelling so that you can also choose to break them for the right reasons too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, like we showed up at that summit with an entire sports brackets whiteboard to try because we had a method of how we were thinking we were going to run the room at first. But like as we started going, we decided like we need to break the brackets to make the
Yeah.
story work in the best way that it possibly can. So we did. We broke the brackets, but then we were able to remake them in a new way.
Yeah.
I think that there's two things that could be potential downsides to this whole idea, and I think that you've solved them in advance. One is that there was like that DC versus Marvel crossover in 1996 where it was all very like fans would vote on who won the big fights, and it felt very by nature like the creators were just structured in into death, where it almost didn't feel like a story to some degree, even though I loved it because I wanted to see Wolverine and Lobo fight, and that's just how it is. And the other thing too is that with the entire corpse crew, with everyone involved and everything like that, and with you only having like the beginning and the end and the pin in the middle, it could feel not cohesive. It could feel
Yes.
like a mess to some degree. But it seems like you got rid of the bracket, which I think was important for getting rid of that head to head fight thing. Made it feel a little bit more organic, perhaps. And then it seems like Jordy's going to help because she's going to make the art feel consistent. Becca's going to help because she's going to make the lettering consistent. But then on top of that, the fact that you have that kind of bookends of your characters in there, I think that's going to help a lot. But how do you manage those things where it feels like a story above all?
Well, I was a part of the DC Commandy Challenge from a few years ago, which was more of a like we haven't talked about the title, like Exquisite Corpses. Like there is a game that is called an Exquisite Corpse game, and it has a few different iterations, but it's like an Exquisite Corpse, like as a writing game, is often like a writer tells a story and hands the baton to the next person, and the next person can tell whatever part of the story is next, and and then hands the baton on, and whatever is told next is canon and can't be changed, and you have to iterate based on that. And so in Commandy Challenge, there was no talking between each of the writers. You would get the script that what came before you and the cliffhanger of that script, and you basically had to tell a story blindly up to another crazy cliffhanger and then hand it to the next person. But at the end of that, you don't have a cohesive story. You have something that is like a creatively fun game, but it's like that pushes
Doesn't
the
necessarily add up.
extremities of style and like all of this, but it isn't a cohesive whole. So from Go, I knew we couldn't do that. We could not just have that kind of disparate thing. I think like, but we did have elements of it. Like literally, like Michael was saying, it's like I laid out the first issue, and basically I broke the issue that everyone had read in the room on the board in how I wanted all of the issues like broken from there out, which is basically following by the civilian characters, like what are their beats in what order, like along the timeline. And then like Michael went up there and pitched out his vision of number two, like with all of the beats that carried forward from there. And then we had figured out the order that we wanted to do the first half of the story in. And then the next writer went up on the board and started pitching. But then from there, we were able to we started riffing. We started like playing with all of the pieces and interrogating it as we were building it. Like we did function as a writer's room. But there was always kind of like the writer of the issue at hand was the one kind of driving and then this happens, and then this happens. But then as a collective, we were interrogating it and, pushing the pieces in the right order and making sure that we were serving the entire narrative. And then once like the whole first half of the story was broken, then we tightened the screws of the entire first half of the story. And so there's like, okay, do we feel like that feels like the cohesive first half of Exquisite Corpses? Then Michael went up there and pitched out the start of the next half of the story. And then we carried on from there. And it's just like, and it's one of those things where emotionally, like obviously, you can imagine, we start with a big task that shrinks over the course of the series. So it's like, there is a kind of focusing that happens in the second half that like, and it's all had to like, once we started realizing, oh, this needs to happen by this issue, then we start driving in these different lanes. Yeah, it's fun.
And it must be said that one of the only reasons that this could be so cohesive and as successful as it was is that the Tiny Onion people, the infrastructure of Tiny Onion is incredible. Steve, Greg, and Eric are just incredibly sharp editors, and they were able to like kind of rein everybody in when needed and then put all this wild information that we had out there together into like a very readable document for everybody to work from. And you like very oftentimes when you're doing a creator owned book like this, you don't have that kind of infrastructure in place. So being able to have the Tiny Onion team behind this helped immeasurably.
Well, and a step beyond that, I think that there was like we didn't just have the editorial team there. We had the production team there, and we had the marketing team there, our communications department under Jaslyn. Like, so it was one of those things that while we were sort of riffing on all of this, they were taking notes about just like, okay, like here's a key, like, element here. Like I would say there's a running part of the story that I think like, Michael, it's very much your baby, where it's the band No Life, which is just like, it's the local punk band. And it's just like, and Michael like kept seeding it out. And then it's just like, Jaslyn is like, all right, we need to lean into band posters. We need to lean into like that being the like key to the whole core aesthetic of the whole project. And everyone understanding like tonally what we're going for, like all of this allows the entire team to like create the entire design identity, create the like all of these like big pieces that was always the thing that would frustrate the hell out of me at like, big two summits, like where it would be like we would come up with all of these ideas, but it's just like, we would want like, okay, could we do like one of those 2-page ads that has all of those clues in it, like did back around Countdown. And it's just like, but the marketing person wasn't in the room. And then it's just like, it would take months for them to find out. And then it'd be too late to put that in motion. And it was just like having everyone there like not to like, the people who weren't part of the story side weren't like, if they had an idea, they would throw it out there, they would participate. But it was just like the storytellers were the ones that were driving the storytelling. But it was just like having them there allowed them to absorb everything. And then it's made this like, the gamble was that like that'll make it easier for them to sell the book. And it seems like, like knock on wood, it feels like that's paying off.
You're making me wonder how far down the rabbit hole of pricing out fox face killer masks Jaslyn and Courtney are. No comment, I'm sure. No comment. But
yeah, no comment.
I mean, I do like the fact that there are some characters that lend themselves to cosplayability. Let's say that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like it's more it comes back to the principles of like Erica Slaughter. Like where it's not cosplayability isn't the first consideration. That's not what like, but it is one of those things that we are going, like we're in a visual medium. It's what I've like talked about a lot in the past is like the key image. Like what is the key image of a story? And then in a smaller story, there's one key image. This is a story with 12 key images. Like each of the killers is a key image in and of themselves. And so it's just like tonally, they need to capture the entire spirit of the book. Just seeing the image of one of these killers needs to say what the book is. And so it's like, yes, we were definitely trying to hit that kind of Fortnite vibe, like a kind of, like manga influence, superhero influence. Like we wanted to sort of blend, like, who's the reader of this book? What are all of the things like visually that they respond to? And how can we kind of like take those vibes and cohere them into these like visually dynamic killers and push them in different directions? And then a lot of it was like me and Walsh in the Discord going back and forth on like little details. Like once like the core shape of a character was set, it was like, like Gamer Kids is a great example where we just started riffing on like, okay, what if we push the costume more into this like Boy Scout uniform? And then it's just like, how can we like punk up the Boy Scout uniform in a bunch of like little like gamer ways that like make him a more, like visually dynamic character from Go. And it's just like that's the, it's the little pops. Like what are the aesthetic things that will just catch the eye of the reader?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's also like almost a superhero costume element to the killers because they usually only have two really definitive colors in their color identity, which is, I think, something that's just visually really works on the page. But then when you're costuming is something that is also easier to costume when there's just like, each X-Men has like two colors, while each of the killers has kind of two colors that are their colors.
Yeah.
Well, and that also allows the cosplayer to iterate on it. If they lean into those two colors and only have one element of a costume, then they can make a character. It's clear who they're trying to be, which is like, it's a really cool way to do it.
All this is what I think is really fascinating. The book is great. I don't want to underrate the book. The book is the comic is first and foremost in all the ways it can be first and foremost. But I think the fascinating thing about it is it felt like a big idea, but the way you're all approaching it feels even bigger than that. And I think that that's super important right now because we are an attention society. It's very difficult to get people's attention. How important is it for you all? You want it to be book first and foremost, but how important is it for you all to make this feel like a bigger than average deal so you can kind of bring that attention in?
I think it's very important because ultimately this is an experiment. And I think that the most exciting things often are, but it's also something that we all believe has the potential to be a very, very commercial concept. This is something that we built it for all these artful reasons, but we're also very confident in its ability to do well in this market. And it's this is. But then it's just how do we sort of express that to all of the people who buy comics? And in this, it's what you're pointing to exactly. It's the attention economy. It's how do we actually capture attention? And it's we have to lean into what we are doing differently, and we have to express what we're doing differently. Because there's the more craven way to kind of do all this, where it's me and Walsh could kind of downplay the fact that there are other creators involved with this. And it's sort of that there's the handoff and try to just lean into our names. But that wouldn't be interesting. And that doesn't capture what this is. And it's just then that just, can you hear me?
Yeah, your audio cut out it says my internet connection is unstable. I'm sorry, I'm almost done. My internet's conspiring against me, but you cut out when you said then that just after you were talking about the energy you were trying to bring to this, basically. I'm sorry, that was probably a terrible spot to like cut.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. What's my way back? What was the broader concept?
The broader concept was like how big you were making it and how you wanted to make it feel like something, the attention economy. You were talking about how like
You were talking about bringing the people in, and that was a purpose of Tiny Onion, James, to comics community.
Thank you. I couldn't hear that side.
So like this is I think one of the big things that we were trying to do in building Tiny Onion. Tiny Onion like can't just go out and put out the sort of books that I was able to put out as an individual working in this space. It's like we have to show that it's like, okay, we got a little extra cash. That means we have time to develop something, and we have time to like actually like develop it in a considered way over time, and then like cook it correctly and then bring it to market, and it being this larger than life thing. And it's just like that. And I believe that it's like if we put the sort of time and effort into these things that the best like superhero events have always done, then we could do something that could hit the market like a superhero event. And it's just like, and we'll find out. But it is I don't know. It's like, it is really, really exciting. The last month has been extremely, extremely gratifying. Like we announced the series in the week leading up to Comics Pro. And then, which also then allowed so the word got out that this is a series that exists. And beyond it being a series that exists, it's this huge creative jam with all of these characters and all of these creators involved in all these characters that people can sink their teeth into. And then we showed up at Comics Pro with an ash can that had the first pages of the story, but details on all of the killers involved in it and the world that this is set in. And then it's just like, and then we had like the Tiny Onion team going around like in the round tables, and it was like we have Devin Funches, our new retail lead, and we had Harley Salbaka, who's our events lead, and then we have had Eric Harburn, who's the primary editor of this whole project and the head of editorial at Tiny Onion, and they were the ones going table to table, like pitching out, this is what the story is, handing over. We had one of the first cards that we had made up, like a special like version of that. So it's like, here's the world, here's how we made it, here's the like whole vibe of the thing. And it was like there was something really electric about all of that, and getting it into people's hands. And then that kind of like the drumbeat from that to Emerald City, where then we were able to like actually sell a version of the ash can out into the world to people who were there, and like had shown more of the covers. We had people starting to get a sense of all of these killers. And the amazing thing was, it's like in that first panel that we did, that fireside chat, like people were like asking us about like, which killer is going to beat which killer. Like people were referring to killers as their favorite killer. And it was just like, that was like such a cool feeling. And then the other thing that's been happening kind of, in conjunction with this is like, the collector market is kind of, has been a little like quieter in the last couple of years after the heyday of, a few years ago. But this was a project that we always knew that with all of these iconic characters, it has the kind of red meat that the collector market often really responds to. And it was like, so I was talking to my friends in that space, especially because I was out at MegaCon right before the announcement, and I was showing off like, here's the killers, here's all this stuff. And now I don't think I'm allowed to say this. I'll let myself get in trouble if I do. It's just like, we're a month out from FOC, and we already have like roughly like 35 retailer variants on this.
Oh, wow.
Which is like over, like, I think it's like 10 more than the most retailer variants I've ever had on any of my covers. Like, and we are a month out from FOC. So it's just like, it feels like the drumbeat that we've been trying to like, going all the way back to like us posting images at that first summit, like us putting the ad in the back of the Tiny Onion Presents newspaper in New York City, New York Comic-Con, and it's kind of letting retailers know that me and Michael were working on something together. And then it's just like that, the culmination moment of the announcement, and Comics Pro, and then like really getting able to dig into it at Emerald City. It just has the feel of an actual like rollout that, you know, like honestly would have been wildly like next to impossible to do without the infrastructure of Tiny Onion.
Yeah.
But I
Michael,
also want to say Image Comics has been like really, really incredible in backing this book. Like it's one of those things, like we're trying to do like things very like us having our own internal team and all of that. But like going back to New York Comic Con, I think they started to see that it's like, oh, this is like this has the potential to be a heavy hitter for us. That allowed like they've really come behind this book in a really, really wonderful way. And I couldn't be more grateful.
I don't think you literally could not have done this book anywhere else. I don't think. I mean, it
Yeah,
had to be there. Michael, I love the fact that basically just on the strengths of your designs and your art, people are already like repping really hard for characters. I think that probably is a pretty cool feeling that people are just like, I'm a fox, I'm a fox face killer? Yeah, fox face killer. Like super fan, and you're like, you haven't even read the book yet, but you just love the design so much. I mean, that really speaks to how much the designs are speaking to people. But to close, I want to talk about some bigger things because this is existing in a very strange time. It's a big book that's coming out, but it's a big book that's coming out in a weird time for comics in the world. As of right now, Diamond Comic Distributors still exists. I think bids closed today. There aren't any tariffs affecting comics for now, and things are the same as they were yesterday. I'll start with you, Michael. How do you manage this moment in time? Like, does it feel different navigating everything right now, or is all you can do focusing on Exquisite Corpses, making the best book, getting it out there?
Yeah, for me, you know, that's one of the really big pleasures of working with Tiny Onion is they have an entire crew of people that are able to focus on that side of things. And then me and James can focus on just doing the best comic book humanly possible with all of the resources that are at our disposal. For me, you know, I just want to make this comic book as good as the potential that it has, because it is just one of those things that as soon as James came to me with the idea, as soon as we got in the room, as soon as we started putting this on paper, it just felt like this is truly something that feels limitless to me in the possibilities of where it can go. So for me, it's just about doing the very best work that I'm capable of, making it, you know, making something that I'm proud of that I would also read, and then also making the game really playable and fun, giving the characters depth. You know, it's just really, for me, it's a focus on story and art at the moment, but all of the other stuff that's swirling around us in the periphery about the success of the book commercially, you know, that's something that is just going to give us the opportunity to tell more of these stories that I love telling.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I mean it is certainly a wild time. And you know, the last few years have been, you know, they've been a scary, like I mean they've been scary at virtually every level, from on a societal level and on a, you know, but on an industry level as well. But I mean, I think going back to the fall, seeing the success of the Absolute line and DC All In, it was just like, okay, there's energy here. It feels like people are getting into comic shops. People are looking for something new, and that was sort of the first instance where it's just like, okay, it's like we might be able to catch some of this wind in our sails, and it's just like, so everything has been about trying to catch the wind in our sails, and there's a certain element where it's just like we have to cross our fingers that they're, you know, like that a destabilizing element won't you know, like throw us off. But I mean, this all goes back to the pandemic. Like we've experienced a wildly destabilizing moment. Like all printers were shut down for 2 months, like in the United States, and that was, you know, like that moment and everything that I think came from that moment, like both in terms of like my career and how I like approach everything, is, you know, like there's an element of adaptability and, you know, and a focus on what matters. And really, like, I think there is a core belief that it's just like, all right, if we are making something exciting that we are excited about, and we can express that excitement to people and, like, you know, in the right way that gets them excited, then they'll want to play with us. Like, and that's what we've spent the last 6 months doing. That's what we're going to keep doing. Like, we're not just we're trying to build this into something that can last for years. So it's just like, we're not ending this with, what issue 1 FOC isn't the end of this story. We are going to try to continue this story going to like keep capturing this kind of energy. And we're so immensely excited and proud of this, and we just want it in as many hands as possible. But it's like, we're still being conservative in our internal like projections in terms of like what success looks like, because it's just like, yeah, there's a lot we don't know, but it's, like, hopefully, like, the initial indicators of where this is going are really, really promising. And we're really hopeful that we can really capture people's attention this May.
Well, I think you got the main thing right. It's a great comic. I'm looking forward to everyone reading it. But guys, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Exquisite Corpses, con life, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, David.